Primus has just released a new EP titled Handful of Nuggs, which is supposed to be golden nuggets. The some of the songs, the EP was released 3 days ago as of this taping, and some of the songs just hit YouTube on the official Primus channel today. So I wanted to react to some of them along with you. Now, a little bit about Primus. I first discovered Primus because my brother was working in a mailroom this would have been the late 80s, and he would occasionally, or actually rather often, bring home promo CDs that I guess nobody in the building wanted. And one of those CDs was Frizzle Fry by Primus, their first studio album from 1989. And I remember popping it in. The song called "To Defy the Laws of Tradition" is the name of the first tune, and it was just like a little too much for me. Like my brain couldn't handle it. And so I remember getting rid of it. And by the a few years later, when I went to college, I was aware of who they were. Actually, Primus played Rochester, New York, my third night here. It was like August 30th, 1990 or something like that. They were opening for the band 24/7 Spyz, who I've written about on my Substack and on Pop Matters. I wrote about them when their former frontman, Peter Fluid, was killed in the Bronx last year. And I referenced this show that I will always remember for not going to. I was just new in town. I didn't know my way around. I had no idea how I was going to get from the University of Rochester campus to the venue, which is no longer there. It was at a legendary place, legendary around here, named Backstreets. And it's one of those lifelong regrets. It's like, why I could have seen Primus touring behind Frizzle Fry, opening for another band, and didn't get to go, which is really, really, really too bad. Although I don't know that I would have necessarily gotten it, but I did get to see them 3 years later at the 1993 edition of Lollapalooza. They headlined that year's edition. I walked in there going, I kind of like a couple of their songs, but there's no way I'm going to be able to sit through a whole set of theirs without losing, getting bored or losing patience or even getting a headache, without getting sick of their sound. I hadn't quite acclimated to what they do. And then I was like, there's no way they're going to be able to like close the show after 7 other bands, including Rage Against the Machine, Tool, Arrested Development, Fishbone, Dinosaur Jr., and Alice in Chains. And there was also Front 242 was also on that bill. I mean, how are they going to close that? Well, they blew me away. They were awesome. At that point, they were touring behind an album named Pork Soda, and I was really knocked out. I couldn't believe how intense they were, especially after seeing like 5 other heavy bands. Let's see, Rage, Tool, Fishbone, Dinosaur Jr., and Alice in Chains. 5 other heavy, hard charging bands on the same bill, and they were not exhausting at all. They were big enough for the moments. They were able to inhabit the role of like a closer of a major festival. And I've been a fan ever since that night. I was really, really, really doubled over, and they totally won me over that night. So, by the way, I'm Sabby Reyes Kulkarni, the apostate music journalist. Welcome to I believe it's the 39th Feedback Def live stream, a daily, sometimes, or daily 5 or 6 days a week, sometimes 2 or even 3 times a day conversation about music, memory, meaning, and life. mostly about music, but sometimes about other stuff too. If you like what I'm laying down, I would urge you to hit the like, subscribe, and notification buttons. And if there's a hype button, hit that too. You can make a donation. You can buy me a coffee. You can make a donation via Cash App. It's $feedback def. We are like stripped to the bone on this show. I'm at a public library. I walk and take the bus to deliver this to you. This is a low rent operation if there ever was one, but I'm happy to have you on board. All right, so Primus forms in the Bay Area, the San Francisco Bay Area in 1984. Les Claypool is in high school. He's like a classmate of Metallica's Kirk Hammett. He is in the same social circle as people like Jim Martin from Faith No More. He witnesses the birth of the Bay Area thrash scene. He actually even auditioned for Metallica when Cliff Burton was killed. And you know, that story's out there. It's been out there for decades. But even though Primus, even though you know the thrash thing is really taking off in the Bay Area, there's also this funk metal burgeoning wave that's going on there. And the various members of Primus have talked about this over the years. That San Francisco, the music scene, there was always eclecticism in that music scene. So Primus are metal adjacent. They are also very close to the whole funk metal thing. When they toured with 24/7 Spyz, who I mentioned, they were considered all, you know, Primus, 24/7 Spyz, Faith No More, part of that whole thing. There was Psycho Funkopus, there was Mindfunk, although Mindfunk are not from the Bay Area, and a bunch of bands like that. Mordred, one of the first metal bands or heavy bands to have a DJ, if not the first that I know of. But it doesn't take long for Primus to kind of trip out into their own lane. They have hits on MTV. They're probably the least likely band ever to have hits on MTV, but Jerry Was a Race Car Driver becomes like an alternative era staple. Beavis and Butthead, you know, 120 Minutes, MTV, you know, MTV's regular rotation, they start playing this tune. Primus are also interviewed on Headbangers Ball. So, like I said, they're metal adjacent. They headlined, or they were one of, they didn't headline, but they were one of the acts at Woodstock 94. They do the talk show circuits, like Dennis Miller and I believe the Jon Stewart show. I remember seeing them do Tommy the Cat on, I don't remember which talk show it was. Like I remember seeing that when it happened. Like, wow, that's unusual. So they've managed to have this strange staying power. They're, you know, this band that is clearly influenced by the likes of Rush. Like they're big Rush fans and they wear it on their sleeve, but also with this more avant-garde twist. Like if you're into like King Crimson or groups like The Residents or experimental music like Mr. Bungle, or, you know, other forms of experimental music, but like just off the beaten path, like wacky out there stuff. It seemed like it was in the water, not only during that time period, but specifically in that region as well, and somehow managed to find their place in the mainstream. And so they've had various twists and turns. The classic lineup of the band that appears on their first several records, including their debut, which is a live album named Primus, or named, I'm sorry, Suck on This, which is Primus Sucks, and you hear people yelling that at the beginning. That lineup consisted of bassist, frontman, vocalist Les Claypool, who is known for this very, very active, very busy, like a lead bass way of slapping, and very like kinetic, frenetic style that is Influenced by the likes of Geddy Lee from Rush and influenced by Prog, but very, very, very driving and, like I said, very kinetic. So it's Les Claypool. It's guitar player Larry LaLonde, who is one of my favorite guitar players. Just creates these incredible swells of sound that sort of drift through this very busy active bass drum interplay. And then there was drummer Tim Herb Alexander, who played on their classic material. They have had several drummers. Tim Herb Alexander quits for the first time in the late 90s, or I forget what year it was, 96, 97. He is replaced by Brian Brain Mantia. Then Primus breaks up in the year 2000. They reunite in 2003 with Tim Herb. Tim Herb leaves again. They bring in Jay Lane, who is one of their early era drummers pre the first record. Then Tim Herb comes back, and now they've settled on drummer John Hoffman. The music I'm going to play for you now, their new EP, is the first recorded material with John Hoffman. These are the first recordings they're putting out with him. Actually, before I do that, let me play you a little bit of their classic stuff, some live clips from way back in the day, just to give you an idea of when the world first heard Primus. This is what we were hit with. And I don't really even think their music is like, it's not like the strangest, most out there, most like brain twisting stuff you're going to hear. But just try to rewind to 1989. Say you're not super tuned into avant-garde underground music like Frank Zappa or any other experimental artists in the sort of jazz avant-garde realm. If you're not tuned into that stuff, if you're like into rock music and you have a certain set of sort of boundaries musically, and then you hear this, which ostensibly on paper is rock, but it's like twisting and winding and popping and sort of reveling in its own strangeness. It's like, oh wow, this is something I haven't heard before. Right? So I'm going to play you a clip of the band playing in late December of 1989, just to give you a taste for where they started and how the world first caught on to them, and then we'll fast forward to the present. All right, so that's just a taste of what this band was about. I just love that. Just wah, 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 wah. For Larry LaLonde to find space in that like full on, like attack of the bass and the drums doing so much. I mean, I don't know that there is really a precedent in rock music for a bass to be that audacious, that much in the front and center, like a big fat rhinoceros's ass, like right, like full blast, like in your face. Um, in rock music than before Les Claypool. I don't know that there was a precedent for that. Certainly, you've got Jaco Pastorius, and you've got Tony Levin from King Crimson. You do have Geddy Lee from Rush, where you do have people who are slapping. You have people in the funk realm, and as far as experimental music, if you were into like Fred Frith and players like that, or Mark Ribot, this isn't going to hit you quite from like it's not going to sound so obtuse. But again, if you're coming from rock music and you're hearing stuff like this, like sort of start to bleed into the edges of the mainstream, it's quite remarkable. I think even much, much, much more remarkable than the big deal that people made of Nirvana and bands, the grunge bands becoming mainstream, because grunge bands were basically playing souped up 90s heavy rock. And I love a lot of those bands. I'm not even disparaging that stuff at all. But I think way too much was made of those bands when there was a lot of other really, really, really left of center, like mold shattering music. And Primus definitely shattered the mold. They very much did that. Another thing I should point out is, you know, one of the people who was from their, the Bay Area music scene around the same time was Charlie Hunter, who, much like Les Claypool, like sort of revolutionized his instrument. He plays a combination bass and guitar. And he's Charlie Hunter. If you listen to him, you think, oh, that's an interesting jazzy sort of funk informed guitar player, but he's playing a hybrid bass and guitar. He played that instrument. He contributed parts to another Bay Area band named the Disposable Heroes of Hypocrisy, one of the most interesting rap groups ever. They were a duo. That is the duo that Michael Franti came from. He was the front man of that duo. And Rono Tse was like, he would make metal. He would like get a blowtorch on metal. Like those were the sounds he was making. So this is the incubator, the artistic incubator that Primus were a part of and that they came from. And that, I think, had a huge part in shaping their sensibility. And I would say this band has done vital records all the way up to, I got to look at the year of this album. This was fairly recent, but let's see, the Desaturating 7, which is from, yeah. What year is the Desaturating 7 from? So I would say that, why can't I find it? Where, sorry about that. Okay, the Desaturating. So all the way up to 2017. So within about a decade of now, I think this band was still doing cutting edge stuff. But what are they up to today? This is their first material in 3 years that they're releasing. Let's take a listen and I will respond. Okay. So bloop, bloop, bloop. By the way, before I start, I should also mention Larry LaLonde is one of my favorite guitar players to watch, like how he moves while he plays. He moves the way his music, his style sounds to me. And even though Primus's music is dominated so much by the bass, by Les Claypool, even though his presence, like I said, is a big giant rhinoceros's ass, like taking up the whole room. It seems like, the guitar is like squeezed into the corner because there's nowhere else to go. I think LaLonde does a remarkable job of finding a way to augment and support like the unorthodox, like harmonic um, makeup of this music, and really, really, really should be commended. Very similar to Andy Summers from the Police, where it's like um, very similar to Andy Summers in that, again, the Police Sting dominates so much. Summers and LaLonde end up being bigger. They make a bigger contribution to the music, even though there's less sonic space for them to take up. It's really incredible. So, House of the Rising Funk, since Herb Alexander is my favorite drummer, I'm going to get to that because Alexander is noticeably absent. He's departed the band. He had a very well publicized departure from Primus, where he talked about his health and his mental health and how he had completely lost the passion for playing music. And he said he dreaded even hitting the drums at all. It's like, oh my goodness. I mean, they've had several go rounds with him. I think it's at least 3 tours of duty that Herb Alexander did with the band, possibly even 4. And they had just reached the end of the road with him, or he had reached the end of the road or the end of his rope with playing music. So let's hear what, but yes, I agree with you. I agree with you, House of Rising Funk. Let's hear what they're up to today with their new drummer, John Hoffman, and let's weigh it. A Handful of Nuggs. All right, here we go. Do not play.
$10 for a large. $10.
Ah, my God, I just showed a free. Fuck you. Ugh, this is disgusting. I should have queued this up beforehand. My apologies. All right. Okay, so right away, it's obvious they are referencing the beginning of the song Frizzle Fry, or if they're not, I mean, there's no way they can't be referencing that. The title track from their debut studio album Frizzle Fry, which I mentioned, has this sort of not vaguely, it sounds very Eastern, like Middle Eastern tinged intro, like this misty, airy kind of build up before the song starts, and this almost feels like they're nodding back to that, or not almost. It feels to me like they are making a concerted effort to reference that part of their past. Okay, so the first thing I'll say here is that I'm hearing things that I've had trouble with this band for many years at this point. One of the things that really stands out to me about their output, I would say their first 4, at least 3 albums, and I would say 4 because I count the album by the band Sausage, Riddles Are Abound Tonight, which is an earlier incarnation of Primus with Jay Lane and guitarist Todd Huth. It's a Primus album, I consider it, other than in name, because while the classic lineup was active, Les Claypool in the summer of '94, got back together with Jay Lane and Huth, and they did this album, Riddles Are Bound Tonight, and they toured with Helmet and the Rollins Band that summer. To me, that's a Primus album. And I remember thinking at the time, man, there's a certain like window in the lifespan of a band where any band, once they hit their stride, they have inspiration to spare. They're dripping, it's like oozing from their system. Like you can hear the inspiration. When I caught these guys in the summer of '93, they were like in peak form. They were like really just like just even in the way a musician in a band like this will just hit certain notes, the confidence, the stride, it's they almost can't help but be on their game. They're like young athletes. There's an effortlessness, and the creative inspiration is there. So much so that the front man can go do an album with a previous lineup of the same band, and it slots right in with everything else. Now, to me, the departure of Tim Alexander really crippled them. Even though Brain Mantia is a very interesting drummer, two things happened when Alexander left. You start to see a little bit of a slowdown in the inspiration. They're not quite. They're losing something in the fast twitch. They're losing a step in terms of inspiration. Then bands start to repeat their own vocabulary. And the other thing that happened here that I think is really unfortunate is Les Claypool started producing everything. I know he didn't produce oh my God, I forgot the name of the second album that Brain played on. But for a very long time, Antipop, for a very long time, Claypool has been the one producing. They've been self-produced. And as the years go by, I just feel like there's not enough oxygen. There's not enough fresh air or new blood or outside spark coming into their music. And, albums like Green Naugahyde, it's just like, man, you created this thing, you invented this thing that was so fresh, and now you're trapped in that thing, just sort of circling around the same types of ideas. So that bass lick, for me, is kind of like it's typical at this point of what Les Claypool does. I feel like he taps that muscle way too much. There's no way this can impress us the same way it once did, because we've heard him do this type of thing before a lot. And then the airtight containment of the sound of the instruments, like the production quality of it, the choice to these really sort of boxy, like rubbery sounding, very, very, very like no air in the drums, I think really hurts this music. Okay, I'm going to go back to this. I have to say, now that this is my second time hearing this, I heard this earlier today, and I was like, man, those drums just sound so boxy, like similar to what you hear on the Brown album. Like, just like, wow, there's no room. Like, you're not getting the acoustic sense of the room in those drums at all. For whatever reason, Les Claypool likes to record drums like dry, as like a 40-year-old wafer you found in your grandmother's underwear drawer. You know what I mean? Like he just likes them dry and with no sense of ambience. Now that I'm hearing that, I'm liking I'm seeing that there is a production sheen to it. It's not just dry. There is a production character, and it's starting to grow on me. That's what we're with it. Well, this is cool. Okay, I'm very, very encouraged by that. That little passage that I just played, I know I played it out of context, but you get the picture. Um, this is something I don't think Primus gets enough credit for. When they pull back and they do these atmosphere parts, they can do that, I think, very, very, very well and in a very compelling way. And there's a sort of like sprightly quality, this like bright quality to their choice of notes. You can very much hear the influence of Rush in that little passage that I just played. They absolutely wear it on their sleeve. They celebrate like the way Rush is in their bones. Like Rush is genetically within Primus. It's in their musical genes to do stuff like that. And that even sounded like a combination of Rush and the Police, who I know they're fans of both bands. And I like the way that like all of a sudden opens up into this like vista, of sound. So that I'm really encouraged by. I thought they were doing that quite a bit on the the album, the Willy Wonka themed album. I keep forgetting the name of that album, the Desaturating Seven. I thought that was a pretty subdued affair for Primus, and I like when they go in that direction. When they're like, okay, look, we've banged and clanged and clonked and zonked a lot over the last 40 plus years. Let's let's try some new let's try some new vibes here. And I don't think enough bands do that. Because I can hear people saying, well, Zeb, what do you want them to do? Like this is what they do. I hear people say that all the time when I say that a band starts to repeat itself and draw from its own from the language they invented. Um, I hear people say, well, what do you want them to do? This is what they do. But what I just played for you is the perfect example of a band being able to stretch beyond its own rules, for lack of a better word. So, House of the Rising Funk sends the Seven was my least favorite album. I hear you, man. I mean, everybody's got their favorites. Um, but you know what? You know what isn't another one of my favorite albums? The EP they did right when they got back together in '03. I didn't realize they had only been broken up for 3 years because it felt like a long time when they came back. There's an EP that they did as a companion to a DVD called Animals Should Not Try to Act Like People. That was when they first got back together with Tim Herb Alexander. And I just love the stuff on that. Again, a lot of atmosphere, a lot of mood. This is the thing with this band. They their music is very moody. Like it's surface level, very goofy and almost sounds like cartoon music. They like using claymation. They use goofy, mascots. If you go to their YouTube, there's like a claymation, looks like a mermaid, a merman or something, right? There's that layer, but Les Claypool's lyrics tend to have a very serious undertone almost all the time, which he doesn't get enough credit for that either. And I don't think he makes it easy for people to readily give him that credit because he kind of comes off as a cartoon, walking cartoon, and he talks on stage like that too. I've interviewed him, a very cool interview subject. He kind of talks like that, just speaking too. But if you pick any Primus song maybe with the exception of Winona's Big Brown Beaver. But there's usually a point underlying the, the sort of circus organ kind of vibe to it. There's almost always a point, and it's almost always serious. And he's actually a really sensitive lyricist, which is not the first word you probably think of when you think of their music, but his lyrics are very compassionate and concerned. And I've always loved that juxtaposition. I think it's a lot of why I'm attracted to the music of Devo, because there's such a contrast between what's being said and then or the way it's being delivered, and then the underlying point or the underlying emotion of the music, and then that is way out of step with the vibe that the music conveys. And I think it's like the perfect marriage of contrast. And when Primus hit that contrast, boy, do they hit it like nobody else. There are times when they really nail that to a T, and when they do, there's nothing else that will give you this kind of this mixed message in terms of the flavor and what's in the flavor, if you know what I mean. So, all right, so that's that tune. I have my concerns with it. I initially felt they're sort of retreading the same ground, that I don't like the production. Then the production in one section really starting to grow on me, and I am very encouraged by them opening up. I really feel like if they got a producer with a strong will, somebody who clicked with Les Claypool, but also could really push against, somebody Les Claypool trusted and said, wait, let's fall back on this thing you're not as well known for, and maybe have certain sections in the music where the unbridled kind of balls out pedal to the metal aspect of what you do functions to punctuate the otherwise, the vibe of the music. You could have an album that has much more contours, much more of like a landscape journey kind of feel than just something that's just barreling forward the whole time. So I'm very encouraged by that. So the next tune, let's skip ahead to that, and let's mute unacceptable, disgusting commercials. All right. Wait a minute. I didn't add it back in. So let's skip to the next tune. This is obviously a cover of the Dio song, Holy Diver. So this is obviously a cover of the heavy metal classic Holy Diver by Dio, which is the band that Ronnie James Dio started after quitting Black Sabbath in 1982. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Did they like sample Dio? Not sample, but did they, as soon as I heard that, because that's obviously not Les Claypool's voice, I was like, is that like, did they somehow like get a track of Dio singing and play music to it, or do they know somebody who sounds just like Dio? Well, it actually is. It is what is the name of this guy? A performer who goes by the name Puddle's Pity Party, who actually performs in a clown outfit and sounds like Ronnie James Dio. So I'll play a little more. Okay, so what I'm hearing here is I just don't get the point of them doing this song. It's not a song that has really much to do with their style. And a lot of times you do get some really interesting creative results when a band goes outside of its comfort zone and covers a tune, that's coming from a completely different place creatively. But I don't hear that here. I hear them kind of almost struggling to do a straight ahead, like the marching groove that this song has. You have to commit to it, and they just sound really stiff, um, in a way that it doesn't bring anything new to the song, and it doesn't show us anything new about them or bring anything out in them that we haven't heard. And so it's just this like strange, misplaced gesture, as far as I'm concerned. So I'm almost not even interested in hearing the rest of it because it has no rhythmic life, which is hard to do to bring to that song because I mean you have to be taking it seriously. Like you can't do that kind of thing ironically, and we're not in the '90s anymore. Like I never thought ironic covers were worth a damn to begin with. They never connected with me. Like I don't want to hear you play a song that you're making fun of while you're playing it, or have the crowd go, "Ooh, that's cool," that they're doing that song, ha ha, wink, wink. And who knows? They might truly love this song, but it doesn't come across in the music. This is basically like a Jack Black skit in music, and I'm not a fan of Jack Black's skits or the way he does the rock out kind of humor thing. Jack Black was in the Ronnie James Dio documentary, and I did not find him to be a welcome presence in that documentary. So let's skip ahead to the next tune. We're gonna, oh, you know what? I'm gonna skip the commercial first, which is, I guess this is part of. Oh my god, so I'm listening to an Allstate commercial, uh, which is still going. Yeah, I just didn't get the point, like, why why that song? It just is not an inspired choice at all. Um, Again, like I said, bands can do things that are not native to them, but, um, it's got to shed light on the song or new light on the song or bring a fresh angle, and it's also got to bring a fresh angle and shed new light on what you are, and that song does neither. Let's see. House of the Rising Funk says, I agree about Holy Diver. I love the Primus version of the thing that should not be, though. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that. Um, I think, even when they would like throw in a little tiny bit of Master of Puppets, which they did for years, there was a it brought something out of Master of Puppets, who were also accustomed to hearing a certain way. It put a twist on it in a way that was really, really different and cool. It wasn't that different. I mean, they were faithful to the original tune, but it just their groove just sounded kind of alien in that context. And I should say, to House of the Rising Funk's point about Tim Herb, man, he had a way of hitting that kick drum that just had so much. I mean, it was like this like lead boot, just boom, boom. And he didn't play especially fast. Um, he had this strange, almost like a stillness to his playing. Like he never felt like he was rushing, almost like behind the beat a lot of the time, even though their music is very busy. But that right foot would just like slam down, and it was such a like, oh wow, such an authoritative way of playing the kick drum. And look, hats off to John Hoffman. I mean, it's a dream gig for somebody to be drumming in Primus. They were very public about having this public, call for submissions for people to join the band, and that's got to be hugely exciting. But you've got big shoes to fill, and you've got this entire catalog and legacy. And is this the way the band should be introducing the world to their new drummer? Now, the next tune was actually released last year. It had already been out. It was already on their Bandcamp. It was already out. It's called Little Lord Fentanyl, featuring Maynard James Keenan, and it says featuring Maynard James Keenan / Pussifer. So here we go. Okay, so I mean, again, I want to hear more air in those drums. Like, you're killing what the drums, the full power and expression that the drums could have by having them be so thin. I think that worked on the first tune the more I hear it, but it's like, give us something that has like an acoustic character to it. Drums in a room sound great. I mean, they're moving air into a room. As the person recording a drum kit, or as the producer, it is part of your job and your goal, hopefully, to capture some of that air, some of that room, some of that ambience. It's not there on this. And like, that is a pretty interesting drum figure, but it's all of it just feels too busy in this immature way. It's like, can you take some of those notes out? Boom, like, can we hear some of the subtlety and shading and nuance that you're adding when you're not just playing a bunch of notes quickly? Can you show us some more finesse in your touch? Because it's got to be there. If we slowed this music down, we'd be hearing these little bits of articulation. They don't need to race by you all the time. It kind of reminds me of someone who's like bad at sex, and the partner has to be like, whoa, slow down. Like, work your way up to that. Don't be like, right off the bat. Things need to build first. And you're starting from way up here. And where are you going to go from there? It just feels halting and awkward. Let's keep going a little bit with this one. All right, so this is a tune where it's very clear Les Claypool is talking about something, a more serious subject. He has addressed these kinds of things in the past, and it may sound snide, but it's not. He's actually the music is more emotional than you would initially suspect from the way it sounds, or it's more emotionally open and more affected by what it's describing. All right, so this tune for me does not develop or go anywhere. Like, we're already over 2/3 through the song, and I have not heard anything, any sort of sense of progression or entering into another part of a song that is keeping me interested. So I'm going to skip ahead to the final tune on here, which is a live song, a live recording. and I'll wait for the commercial to. Yeah, I mean, that is not promising, what I just heard, Little Lord Fentanyl, especially since that song has already been out for a year. It's, like, really giving me the impression that they just, like, scraped together some scraps and we're just like, "Here, let's throw that to our fans," as an excuse to, you know. Les Claypool just announced, or they just announced a bunch of dates where Primus is going to be playing with Les Claypool's Frog Brigade and the Claypool, Ono Claypool Delirium, or the Claypool Lennon Delirium. I don't know. Oh, I was thinking Ono Lennon, um, uh, Ono Lennon Plastic Band. Anyway, the Claypool Lennon Delirium, Les Claypool's Flying Frog Brigade, and Primus are all going to be touring on the same bill, on a bill called Claypool's Gold, or Claypool Gold 2026, that runs from May 20th, which is a couple of days from now, starts in Reno, Nevada, and runs and closes out on July 4th at the Meritage Resort and Spa in Napa, California. That's not really coming anywhere near me. Um, uh, which is unfortunate because I would actually check that out. But that's cool. So it's all three bands. But again, I don't know that I don't think that, or I definitely feel that, like, not having an outside producer as an outside creative voice has totally hurt this band's career. Um, Maybe not financially, but it's hurt them artistically. This is a guy who does not have a clear sense of when too much is too much or when to hold back. And in all of these situations, maybe with the exception of the band he has with Sean Ono Lennon, um, Claypool Lennon Delirium, I don't hear enough pushback. I just hear him just being pedal to the metal most of the time, and not having a sense for when the bass goes from being, oh, that's really interesting and assertive and unconventional, to, oh, that's now overbearing and grating. And it's cool if you want to put out an EP to put Primus back in the news cycle right ahead of these dates that are starting, but this feels very thrown together to me overall, this EP. So let's play the last tune, and then I'll have some closing thoughts. Uh, oh, whoops. Okay, so I've heard enough of that for now. That's another example of a song that if Tim Alexander were playing it, it would it would sound so much more driving. There would be so much more life in that. The way that would just, it would just feel like a tank rolling forward, or some strange big fat bottomed creature that was moving in this awkward but really awe-inspiring and maybe even frightening kind of way. Um, Again, that's not the fault of their new drummer John Hoffman. It's just the creative supervision isn't there with this band. Like, Les Claypool being at the helm and making all these decisions without any outside input, I think is really showing. And it's too bad because we don't know what these guys would be capable of if they weren't if they weren't so insular and in their own world with their creative decisions. This is a band that came on with so much promise. They were such a breath of fresh air, even a slap in the face, or just like cold water being splashed in your face. Like, whoa, I don't even know, man, that just woke me up. I don't even know if it's pleasant or not, but man, that was a real jolt, and how much more can you jolt us almost 40 years later when you're, you know, circling around a lot of the same ideas and you don't have any outside perspective? How much can this drummer possibly assert himself with creative input in this situation? That, I'm guessing it's doubtful. I mean, I don't think Les Claypool left much room for most of the other drummers in the band besides Tim Herb to assert themselves either. So it's unfortunate. I would still see them. I really wish, like, if I could have one wish for this band, it would be that somehow a producer who loves them but has new approaches in mind could convince them, or a record label, for them to work together to at least try it and then see if the sparks were there, and if you could have some sort of fresh, like, rejuvenated approach to making music, come into the picture with these guys, because they desperately need it, and I think they could benefit. I think they still have enough in their tank that they could benefit from that. But that's not what we're getting here. I do hope they put out a full length album. I'm sure there will be more continuity, at least with that, at the very least. I mean, it won't just be like, here's 4 things, a live tune and 2 new songs and a tune that was already out last year. There would be more continuity to a record. There would be more of a sense of, we're making a complete statement, even if it didn't agree with me, all of it. I could at least get behind that. But, kudos to them for surviving this long. Maybe success and achieving success beyond what anybody could have ever expected for a band like this to achieve, maybe in a way that's worked against them too, because it's allowed them to rest on their laurels a little bit too much, I think. If they were scrappier and had to have a sense of, like, it's us against the world, maybe there'd be some more maybe we'd be hearing more vitality. I hope we hear more. I hope this is just a little bit of a stopgap, like a appetizer, like an hors d'oeuvre tray, for what this band has up its sleeve next. I hope they put out a record sometime this year or next year after all these dates. I still would go see the show, but what do you think? What do you think of this new Primus? What do you think of where Les Claypool is at this stage in his career? How much have you seen Primus or any of Claypool's various other efforts? Where do you think Primus fits in 2026? What would you like to hear from them? What are you thinking of this new material? I want to hear all about it. Let me know in the comments. Other than that, for Feedback Def, I am Sabby Reyes Kulkarni, the apostate music journalist. Thanks for hanging with me. Over and out.